Hello friends, good afternoon and welcome to EduSat Live Lectures. Dear friends, today we are going to talk about Introduction to Food Safety. To discuss this topic, we have with us our subject expert Dr. Shalini Sehgal. Dr. Sehgal is Associate Professor in Department of Food Technology in Bhaskaracharya College of Applied Sciences, University of Delhi. Without further ado, I would like to welcome ma'am to our studios and request her to start the lecture. Welcome ma'am.
Thank you so much. Today I'll be talking about food safety. Food concerns each one and all of us, but safe food is very, very important for all of us because at the end of the day, we all are consumers. When we talk about food safety, we should be talking about the definition of food safety, which says that the food should not cause harm to the consumer when it is prepared or eaten as per its intended use. In the definition, the word intended use is very important because even if we take a common food commodity like salt in large amount, it will become unsafe for us. When we talk about food and we talk about safe food, it means it should be free of microbiological, chemical or physical hazards. When we use the word term hazard, we mean anything which is biological, chemical or physical in food and it has the potential to cause an adverse effect. This means food is always associated with different types of risks or hazards and they can cause harm. At times you will find that people they fall sick after having hazards and sometimes the food is so unsafe that it leads to fatalities. Now when we talk about the common food hazards, there are 4 types of food hazards. The first one category which we have is the microbiological hazards. Microbiological means the hazards which are associated with the microbes and this is one hazard category which is very, very important because we are not able to see these hazards in the food. When we talk about these hazards, these are the hazards which are invisible. Then we come to the next category, physical hazards, which are very, very visual. Every customer can see it while consuming. They are physical means shreds of glass, pins, any kind of metallic shreds which are coming in the food and they will cause injury to the consumers. Then the third category which is alarming actually, the chemical hazards which enter into the food via various routes. These routes can be a cleaning solution, it can be a aerosol, a fumigant which has been used in the food industry and with the advancement in food science and technology, nowadays we are also talking about 4th category of hazards such as the ones which are capable of causing allergies. In this, the most common is the peanut allergy which is there. So if you see the new law which is there, it is mandatory now to mention on the pack of the food that it is having peanuts or it is containing soya, it is having milk proteins because these are the common allergens which are there in the food product. When we talk about the invisible hazards, the microbiological hazards, they are of the maximum significance in food safety because food comes from the environment and environment has all types of microorganisms in it. Food comes in contact with soil, it will come in contact with air and it will surely come in contact with water which is being used for the irrigation purposes. And if the environment is polluted, the quality of food is deteriorated. In the environment, we have various types of microorganisms which are there. We have the first category that is the bacteria, followed by the yeast. Then we have protozoans, molds and viruses. Now, for one common factor in all of them is that they cannot be seen in the food even if they are present. Therefore, the threat to the food is very great if bacteria, viruses and these microorganisms are present. We'll move over to the first category, that is the bacteria. Bacteria, they are the single cell organisms which multiply at a very fast rate and chance of making the food unsafe is highest in comparison to other microorganisms. When we talk about the fungi, the class fungi consists of molds and yeast. Molds again pose a big threat to food because they produce secondary metabolites which are known as mycotoxins, and these mycotoxins, they are carcinogenic in the long run because they get accumulated in the system or you can say in the human body, and they have long-term health effects. Viruses is one category which is gaining significance nowadays, and we are talking about various types of viruses such as viruses like swine flu virus, H1N1. So these are the viruses which are on the rise, and they are making the food not fit for consumption. When we talk about the hazards, and when we are talking about the hazards, there are various sources of contamination which are responsible for making this food unsafe. The foremost is the raw material. If you are using a low grade unsafe raw material, obviously the quality of the food product will not be good in the end. So we have to pay lot of attention to the quality of the raw material or the ingredients which are being used for food production. Water. Water, we cannot visualize any food without water. As per the latest act, now the definition of food includes water also, because if the water quality is poor, the food quality will be, ultimately it will be poor only. Then the environment where the food is being grown, that plays a critical role. The soil, because soil has number of microorganisms, and through soil we get so many microorganisms into the food which are harmful. Then when we talk about safe food, the other area which needs attention is hygiene and sanitation. We can have good quality of raw materials, we can have good quality water, we can have a dust-free environment, but if the surrounding area is not neat and clean, the hazards will come in. So we have to maintain hygiene. Therefore, whenever we are talking about safe food production, lots of emphasis is given to general principles of hygiene. Hygiene of the people, hygiene of the plant, and as well as of the surrounding environment. When I am talking about hygiene in a plant, yes, we don't want any pests to be around, because rodents and other pests, they also carry various types of microorganisms and they lead to unsafe food. Insects, insect droppings, their wings, they also add to the physical hazards in food, and they also carry various types of microorganisms, especially the cockroaches. Then when we talk about the animals, any food plant or any catering place, any kitchen, any canteen, it should not be having the access to animals, because animals also lead to unsafe food because they carry microorganisms on their body. With the change in the food processing technology, we are getting more and more processed food, and lots type of packaging material is being used. If this is not a food grade packaging material, then it also leads to chemical hazards in the food. For example, the polymers, they leach from the packaging and they get into the food. The kind of inks which we are using, because most of the printing inks, they use lead, and lead is a heavy metal which makes the food unsafe. So the kind of packing material and the kind of layers, the barriers to the food, this is one area which will threaten the food safety. Then the most important person, the handler, the person who is cooking the food, the person who is manufacturing the food for us, if that person is not keeping good health, is medically unfit, he is going to pass on those microorganisms onto the food surface. It's not only the disease, but it is also the hygiene level of the person, how well he's maintaining his nails, his hair, So this all also leads to contamination, and we can get various type of microorganisms. One example which I would like to share with you is Staphylococcus aureus. This is the bacteria which is found on our nasal septum. This is also found on our hair, on our scalp. Therefore, you will find that most of the cooks are wearing caps, the chefs are wearing caps, because if the hair fall into the food stuff, it leads to the entry of Staphylococcus aureus. So hand washing is the most key area which should be looked during the hygiene and the production of safe food. When we are talking about the food production and we are talking about produce processing, we will find that there are certain steps in the manufacture of the food which lead to contamination, and these steps can be occurring during the production, harvesting, growing, picking, even bundling or packaging. Then this contamination can also happen when we are doing the initial processing, that is the washing, waxing, sorting, boxing of the produce, and this is the complete food chain can compromise the quality of the food. So even if you have processed it properly but you are not distributing it properly, then there are chances that your food will become contaminated or unsafe. This is very, very important for a country like India, which is a tropical country where the temperatures are very high. So if we do not have cold chain in place, there are chances that the food will become unsafe for consumption. Even at the consumer level, when we are slicing, dicing, shredding, if we are not having hygienic practices, even at the consumer end, there are chances that the food becomes unsafe. In the later slides, you find that when we talk about safe food, we are talking about an integrated approach to food safety, where each one is a stakeholder for achieving food safety. When we are talking about the processing line, there are factors which lead to this contamination. It can be the irrigation water, it can be lack of field sanitation. Most of the workers in India who are working in the agricultural farms or the fields, they are not very educated. They are not very aware because we do not tell them about food safety at the farm level. It's not part of the farm level education at all. Then when we talk about the wash water, the handling practices, yes, many industries who are having organized sector, they are trying to train their workers on food safety, but still this is one area which is grossly neglected in India. Then when we talk about the transportation of this produce, the trucks, the systems, the temperatures are not well maintained, and temperature is one area. Temperature acts as a factor which is very, very detrimental to the quality of the food product as well as food safety. And when it reaches home, when the food which was safe during the entire food chain reaches your home, then there are chances that there is cross-contamination happening if we are putting the raw and the processed food together. If we are not washing it properly, the quality of water is not good, then still we are making the food unsafe for food consumption. When we talk about the microbiological hazards, the maximum impetus or the maximum focus is being given to bacteria. Why bacteria? Many people can ask this question, why we talk so much about bacteria? Because bacteria is one type of microorganisms which multiplies in binary fissions. So when you see a cell, a single cell which cannot be seen by the naked eye is able to increase in billions in a matter of 10 to 12 hours. So this increase is very, very dangerous when we talk in terms of food safety. So a mere single microorganism, if you give a 10 to 12 hour time, it is going to be 1 billion cells, and these bacteria, they are responsible for the spoilage as well as they are responsible for various types of foodborne diseases. When we are talking about microorganisms, temperature plays a very, very critical role, because temperature will either promote or will stop their growth. So when we talk about food safety, there is a term which is very commonly used, which is known as the temperature danger zone, and this zone usually is between 5 to 60, and if we go slightly further off, we can take it from 4 to 70 degree C. Why it is so critical? Because this is the area, this temperature is conducive for the growth of microorganisms. They will proliferate, they will multiply. I was just now sharing with you that one bacteria is converted into billion, and this temperature is helpful for increasing them in number. The minute the number increases, this means the safety is compromised, the food is becoming unsafe. So when you see this slide, you will find that we have two zones above 70 and we have a zone below 4 degrees C. Below 4 degrees C is a safe zone because most of the microorganisms, they are sleeping, they are inactivated at low temperature. Only a group of microorganisms which is known as the psychotrophs, they are able to thrive at low temperature. And if you see the temperature which is higher than 70, then we see that the thermophiles are the only group which are able to grow, rest of the bacteria are inactivated. So for having safe food, we have to keep the food away from the temperature range where bacteria can grow and reproduce rapidly. Therefore, we always use a statement that keep the hot food hot and the cold food cold. Now, for a layman, when you have a microorganism coming into the intestine, it goes and binds to the villi which are there in the intestine. These are hair-like fibers which are lining our intestinal path. The microorganism goes and attaches itself, produces a toxin, a poison. The name is enterotoxin because it is being produced in the entron, and it will go and it will start flushing the water and electrolytes out. Therefore, you will find most of the food poisoning syndromes are associated with vomiting and diarrhea because all the water and the electrolytes are being thrown out. This is one picture, electron micrograph, where we are seeing an actual cell, and you can see how these bacteria, E. coli is a commensal microorganism commonly found in all the human intestines. It will go and bind to the villi. You can see the hair-like projections which are coming, and it will go and bind, and it will lead to gastroenteritis, and in some cases it is very acute and some people even might die due to dehydration. Now, when we talk about food and safety, there are certain terms which are interchangeably used, and the most common one which is being used, spoiled food, is unsafe. So we should know what is spoilage. Spoilage means your food is unfit for consumption. There is a damage to the edible quality of the food, although at times we are not able to see how food is contaminated and we consume it, and later on we realize that we have fallen sick if we had eaten outside or we had eaten one day prior somewhere. Then the other category of food which we should be giving lots of significance or importance is the potentially hazardous food. These are also known as PHFS. These are the foods which will promote rapid growth of bacteria because they are rich in nutrients and they are rich in water. For example, milk, meat, paneer, these are the food products which are high risk foods. If we do not keep them properly under well defined guidelines of storage, these are the foods which will lead to potential risk and disease outbreak. We always talk about a term that is cross contamination. Cross contamination means we are transferring a harmful substance from one food to another, and contact, both direct and indirect contact, plays a very, very critical role. I would like to share a very simple example with you. We are using one chopping board. We are taking the chopping board to cut the vegetables. We are also using the same chopping board to cut the meat. There are chances that there will be a cross contamination happening from the raw vegetable to the raw meat or vice versa. Even in the refrigerator, when we are putting food, we have to put the cooked food, the processed food at the top, and all the raw material, all the raw vegetables and fruits, they go in the vegetable tray down. Nowadays, everybody is talking about food safety. There was a time when people used to talk only about food quality and there was no concept of safety. But now we will see everybody will like to have quality as well as safe food. So what do you mean by quality? Quality is a totality of all the features which affect or which make food more appealing to the consumer. Quality parameters can be very simple like color, texture, how it has been packed. But when you talk about food safety, we are not looking to the outside appearance of the food, how it looks like. We are talking about the threats which are hidden inside that food. When we talk about quality, we talk about two concepts. One is quality control and the other one is quality assurance. Earlier, we were talking about quality control. We were just trying to control the quality of the ready-made product. Once the product is made, we cannot do much about the quality. Either it will pass the quality test or it will fail the quality test. Therefore, now there is a new term, that is quality assurance. The company is giving assurance to the consumer that any food they are eating, it is safe. Not only the quality is good, but yes, your health is also not at stake. So we talk about quality assurance nowadays, and that means it is a planned systematic activities implemented to improve the quality. So both quality and safety, they are inbuilt. We have to take them together. We cannot talk about food quality and food safety in isolation. Now, when we talk about food safety, it is an integrated approach. So nowadays we will find various types of terms which are being used, like farm to fork, paddock to the plate, farm to fork, conception to consumption, boat to throat, source to sauce. When you see these terms, for a layman, we can simply explain them that we are taking care of the entire food chain when the food is being grown at the farm until it reaches your table when you are consuming it. This makes food safety a very dynamic system. We cannot talk only about safe food as a consumer, as a producer. We have to talk about our farmers, we have to talk about the food growers, and we have to integrate the entire thing. Whether you are getting a kind of a fruit from the farm, whether it is animal food, whether it is aquaculture or the fishes, we have to look right from the beginning till the last. So we talk about primary stakeholders, we talk about the secondary stakeholders, and we talk about the tertiary stakeholders. That makes the task of food safety all the more difficult because we are talking about large term integrations which are happening right at the beginning and they are going till the end of it. Now, when we talk about the food safety, we have to talk about certain things which are like good practices. When we talk about good practices, they should be followed at all the levels. We have to talk about good manufacturing practices, means how are we manufacturing the food. GHP, good hygienic practices. How are they being manufactured? How is the environment? How is the surrounding environment? So GHPs, they are very, very critical to food safety. Then there is a concept of HACCP, HACCP, which stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point System. This is a product approach. We try to see whether the entire product passes through a safety line and the way it is being processed. At each and every step, we are taking care that it is not contaminated and it is no longer unsafe. Then we have a word MRA, which is microbial risk assessment, because whenever we talk about food safety, microbiology is a very critical area because these are the microorganisms which are hiding inside the food. So, we have to do the assessment of the risk and find out how much threat they pose to the consumer. Then, if we want to put everything in place, the GMPs, the GHPs, the HACCP, the MRA, we have to have a management system. Quality has to be managed. Therefore, there is a concept of total quality management or TQM, because in case of food, we cannot do hygiene just for one day, we cannot maintain cleanliness for one day, it is an ongoing process. So, we need a kind of a management strategy for that, and nowadays we have a system which is known as ISO 22000, which is FSMS, Food Safety Management Systems, which are in place. When we talk about these food safety management systems, we talk about a concept which is known as risk analysis. If we do not know what is the risk associated, we cannot devise or we cannot plan to cut down the risk. This is one area where our country is not having any kind of data so that we can say that this is the risk which is posed by a particular food material. Maximum we talk about synthetic milk, we talk about color dyes in the Indian market. We are also facing problems like growth hormones which are being given to the animals. We are also talking about veterinary drug residues, but till now we do not have any kind of risk analysis. Risk analysis is a three-pronged approach. When we talk about risk analysis, we talk about risk assessment, we talk about risk management, and the third and the very important communication, the component is risk communication. Just knowing a food has risk within a closed door thing will not help. The consumer should know, the processor should know what is the risk. So, when we talk about risk assessment, it has to be scientific and the approach has to be emphasized on biology. Why? Because anybody who is consuming food is a living organism, be it be plants, animals, human beings. So, when we talk about risk assessment, we should have lots of knowledge or information on biology. When we talk about risk management, we have to initiate that what are the risks associated. Are this risk practical? Are they actually happening in the outside world, in the environment? And then yes, if we get an answer yes, we need to work on the policy, how we can restrict these risks from entering the food chain, what emphasis should be given, and what are the critical areas which should be taken into your policy document. Once you make a policy, it should not be only in your files, the policy should be told to the workers in the food plant, to the regulators, to the managers, and we should have a very, very proactive approach that we communicate it to all the people who are handling food at all the stages. So, risk communication has to be interactive and there should be lots of exchange of information, because like I earlier said, it is very dynamic. What threats we have today, they might not be there, and we can get new threats every time which we are not even prepared to handle. Now, when we are talking about food safety and we are talking about integrated approach, we have to look into the factor that each one has to play the role. So, I would like to start with the government, because government is the one which is going to make the policies. It is going to run various types of education programs, outreach programs, so that each one, whether they are living in the metros or whether they are living in the villages, are able to know what is being talked about and how they are impacted. This is one area where our government has taken steps, and they are talking about food safety for last 2-3 years, and we are running many awareness campaigns about it. Then when we talk about the food, it is a role of the government to give you assurance that the consumers, once they consume food, they will not fall ill and they will not have any injury. The government has to make such kind of regulations that the food processors, they do not bring unsafe food to the market. It's a role of the government also to make sure each one is getting safe and healthy food for consumption. Therefore, the government has to provide health education programs, and they have to make policies which are globally there. We have to harmonize our standards with international standards so that the food which is in the country and which is coming into our country is safe for the consumers. When we are talking about the role of government, there is one more area which really needs significance or which needs importance, is that we should not allow the food from other countries which is not safe to enter the Indian market. Our country should not be a dumping ground for unsafe food just because those consignments are being rejected in developed world. This is a very common practice. Sometimes the consignments which are being rejected are sold in the Indian market because we do not have regulations. We do not have policies which will stop these foods from coming into our country. Then when we are talking about globalization and harmonization of the standards, India as a country which is the largest producer in case of milk, we are having the largest production of milk, we are second largest in the world in case of fruits and vegetables. We really need to put regulations in check that our citizens are getting safe food for consumption. When we are talking about the policies, we also talk about the role of the producer. Government is making the policies, but actually are the producers following those guidelines? Are they strictly following the rules and the regulations which are being which are being given by the government? And once, if they are not being followed, is there a mechanism to check them? So we have to make sure that the producer is giving us food products which are safe and they are reaching the plant. There should be a reassurance from the producer to the processor as well as to the consumer that whatever I am selling you is safe. It is not having any kind of threat and it will not lead to any kind of outbreaks or illnesses. Now coming to the role of industry, the food industry, it is known as a sunrise industry. We say there is lots of opportunity in this particular industry because food is one thing which is consumed daily, and there will be never a day where people will stop consuming food because it is an integral part of living or life. So the role of industry is very, very critical, that it makes sure that the food is safe and suitable for human consumption. And when we are talking about the consumers, they should be given enough information to protect themselves from any kind of illness or injury. The government has made labeling guidelines. It is mandatory now to put everything on the label, on the food label, that the food is containing what ingredient. They should also mention on the food label that what kind of allergens are there in the food. So this is a confidence building exercise which every industry has to do, because they have to maintain their brand value and they have to make sure that there are no setbacks to their brand by any kind of a outbreak or any kind of physical injury done to the consumer. Coming to the very, very important stakeholder, the person which is most affected by food is the consumer. We all are consumer, be the government officials, be the food processors, be the producers, consumer, we all are consumers of food. So when we talk about safe food, the consumer should be given relevant instructions. For example, I would like to share one episode with you. We were talking about a canned sweet, that's a rasgulla pack, which is circulated in Diwali and everybody would like to eat. But you will find an instruction on the pack, if the canned rasgullas, they are being opened, they should be consumed between 3 to 4 days. So if as a consumer you open a can of juice or a can of any sweets and you are consuming it after 7 days or 8 days, we are making the food ourselves unsafe, we are going to fall sick. So we have to follow the guidelines which are actually mentioned on the food package. So we have to be aware as a consumer what we are consuming, and therefore we are having best before dates on the food labels. So anytime we go and buy food products, we need to check the labels which are there on the food. We have to see the allergens, and then only we have to make our wise, choices of buying that particular food stuff. When we talk about food product, and once you get the food and you are cooking it at home, you have to take care of food hygiene. You have to cook it in a safe manner, the kind of utensils, the kind of other equipments which we are using to cook this food. So I mean to say here is that the food can be safe, but we can also make it unsafe if we are not aware. There are certain food products which need to be kept under refrigerated conditions, and if we are leaving them at room temperature at the normal shelves, then we are making the same food unsafe for ourselves, and the entire safety chain will be broken at the plate end, at the consumer end. When we talk about food hygiene, we cannot ignore a very critical area, that is a food storage. We have to store the food as per the guidelines. For example, your fats and oils which are very, very prone to auto-oxidation, we have to keep them away from air, we have to keep them in dry, sealed containers away from light. Now the oil bottle was absolutely safe, but you bring an oil bottle and you leave it out near a light source, there are chances that we ourselves are making our food unsafe for consumption. When we talk about food safety, we also talk about certain standards, food safety standards. We are saying it should be an integrated effort, integrated team effort, where the government, the producers, the processors and the consumers have to do hand holding together. Therefore, we will find to make food, we have various standards which are being made. For a country like us, we have Bureau of Indian Standard which gives that ISI mark, and if that ISI mark is there, we are assured that the food is following certain standards, is meeting certain standards. When we talk about spices and condiments, we are talking about the EGMARK mark which is there, the guidelines are there which are met, and you will find that India is trying for globalization. We are trying to bring in food from outside markets, and we are trying to sell Indian food in the developed countries or outside world. So when we talk about the standards, they are very, very critical, because if we maintain standards, then we can sell our food at a global level, at a larger thing, and we can actually talk about safe food. Because if the food is not safe, then that food will be rejected and it will get back into the country. And our projection as a country which is first in production of certain food products, but we will not be number one when we are talking in terms of processed food. We are talking about various kind of agreements, trade agreements which are happening, like the WTO, we have SPCS, we have various type of phytosanitary agreements which are happening, because these are very, very important. If we do not have these agreements with other country, the same standards, they can be acting as a deterrent for the shipment of food across the globe. Now, since the lecture was about safety, food safety, so one thing is very sure, each and every one of us wants to have safe food. If we do not have safe food, there are many implications. We can have human illness, we can have deaths, we can have lots of constraints on the healthcare and the public health systems. If workers are not coming to work, we'll lose many man hours, there'll be a loss of productivity in the workforce, and if the food is not safe, there will be recall. We have to, the image of the country takes a severe beating if the quality is not good. A very recent example is of Maggi, which was found to be contaminated by lead, and there was a recall of all the Maggi products. The company suffered major losses, and everybody felt that Maggi is not a safe product. So we have to also look into the food safety angle because it leads to the building of the brand and it also affects country's image at a global platform. When we talk about unsafe food, there are instances where we can have losses, people will not buy the food if it is unsafe, then tourists, people who are coming, there is a very common term, Delhi belly. Most of the foreigners, they feel they'll fall sick if they come to our country and we have a tagline like that, Delhi belly. So if the food is safe, probably people who are visiting our country, they will not feel that the food which is being sold in the Indian market is unsafe. If the food is not safe, industry will not grow. We will have more unemployment in the country. So when we talk about food safety, it is not only a image building exercise for our country, it is also the economy of the country which is being built upon our agriculture for a country like ours. Then it might also lead to some legal issues, it might lead to some closures of various plants. So when we talk about food safety, we have to have a broader vision and make sure that it's not only a person, the consumer which is affected, it is having a impact at a larger scale at a national level as well as international level. When we talk about food safety, safe foods leads to good relationship with the consumers. We buy certain brands and we are very sure that the food will not be unsafe, we will never fall sick. It also leads to good relationship with the regulatory agencies because regulatory agencies are there to keep a check on the quality as well as safety of the food. Then if the food is of good quality, we get positive publicity and we get lots of access to world markets. I would like to end my talk here. Thank you.
Ma'am, in this larger discussion on food safety that we have had, one thing that I would like to know is what kind of various agencies the government has to ensure food safety. I know a couple of them, which is EGMARC and FSSAI.
Right.
And can you elaborate on that part of it?
The parent body which is taking care of food safety is known as FSSAI, that's Food Safety and Standard Authority of India.
Yeah.
They are the supreme body which takes care of the safety and the standards of the foods which are being sold in our country. Then when I was having the discussion with you, I mentioned Bureau of Indian Standards. Bureau of Indian Standards will make standards for all the food commodities, not only food, but commodities like, cement, gold, metal. They will make the standards and they will give you the standards as well as the procedures how we can find out those standards. So Bureau of Indian Standard plays a very, very critical role. So I will like to mention two of these. Then we have one more organization which is known as Quality Council of India. So the kind of standards which are being maintained all over, not only in food, but in hospitals, in hotels, in anywhere where the food is being served, and they look into that aspect. And when we talk about international organization, we have the Codex Alimentarius, which is having many member countries which are there. India is also one of the members, and we have a national Codex context point in India. So that looks into the guidelines. The guidelines are set by Codex and these are being followed by all the member countries.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, there is this raging debate on, say, organic food versus genetically modified foods. And there are benefits and there are perceived losses as well. Can you probably shed light on what these both aspects of quality foods we are talking about here?
Out here, you have talked about two things. One is the organic food and other is a genetically modified food. So when we talk about organic food, it means that we are not using, pesticides. We are not using the chemicals, and we are following a traditional method of, growing them without the use of pesticides. We are using fertilizers which are coming like vermicompost. We are using biofertilizers. So when we talk about organic food, if you debate on the safety of food, people feel that it has a high content of microorganisms in it because we are not using any chemicals. But if you see a long effect of it, the chemical safety is there. It is chemically safe. And India as a country, majority of agriculture is still organic farming in India. So organic foods, yes, if you are not using the right type of water, if you are not using the right kind of fertilizer, organic food might become unsafe. Now coming to the other question which you asked me is about the genetically modified foods. This is a different segment of foods where we are trying to add value addition to the food by implementing certain varieties or introducing certain genes like high productivity or insect resistance. We are trying to modify those plants so that they give us better production, better yield. So in India, maize is used. Cotton also is being grown, but yes, maize, there was a debate, and there are certain there were some committees which were made. So gradually we'll be talking about maize, but yes, if you see the present scenario, cotton is grown, lots of BT cotton is being grown there. Safety, see, nobody has done the long-term risk assessment. So when it comes to cotton, because we are not going to
consuming
eat
it,
we are just going to wear that cotton, it might be a safe area. But if you are taking out the oil from the same cotton oil seeds, then it might be unsafe. So for talking about safety or being not safe, we have to have risk analysis and risk assessment. And that's what I was sharing with you. This is one area where our country lacks.
It lacks. And anyways, if we are talking about food security of our population, we need to increase the production, not just of wheat, not just of grains, but of millets and of lentils as well. And that actually takes me to another aspect of food security, which is sanitary and phytosanitary standards. And there is this again a debate going on, say between India and European Union. We can take the example of Alfonso mangoes here. And this sanitary and phytosanitary standards, which are pretty strict in Europe. Can you elaborate on this aspect of WTO agreement?
See, when we talk about WTO, it was meant so that there are no technical barriers to trade. We are promoting trade across the globe. But there are certain things which have happened, and being a developing country, we do not have that kind of infrastructure where we can find out certain ingredients or certain residues to a ppb level, to a ppm level. Gradually we are building our resources on it. So at times this is being used against the country, and it is more like a technical barrier to the trade, because at our end we have a level which is slightly higher. So they impose a level which is slightly lower, so that our produce is not able to be sent there. So when we talk about the WTO, yes, it's a very positive approach, but we have to strengthen our infrastructure. We have to put practices in place where we are less and less dependent upon chemicals. We are having less and less residues, heavy metals, pesticide residues, so that we build a very, very positive image at a global level that the food coming from India is also safe.
So in that sense, what you're saying is the sanitary and phytosanitary standards are about the micro level of say heavy metals that's been used to ripen.
See, when you use the word phytosanitary and this thing, it's a very large gamut of things. I was just discussing with you for the residues, but apart from that, There are many other like varieties which are grown in India, species which are there, some species which have been brought from outside. So there are many angles to phytosanitary and this thing. So I was just highlighting one point.
One point of okay.
Right.
So ma'am, again. Just again, contaminations that we were just talking about. There is one major contamination which a number of Indian states are actually fighting against. It's the water contamination, especially fluoride contamination in it. And what are the what symptoms of the problem of this thing is, and if we can probably focus on this water contamination part of it, which is very basic and very essential at the same time.
See, water is very, very integral food, a part of the food. So you cannot talk about water in isolation, and like you have rightly projected the situation of fluorides in water. So once the fluorides are there in water, which is very, very common in the Indian, even in North India as well as in eastern part of the country. So what is happening? We are getting large amount of fluorine, and it leads to fluorosis. When this kind of a situation is there, the bones are affected, and that leads to a kind of, you can say, impairment of the limbs. So the people, they are not able to walk properly, and it has a impact, lots of impact on the public health as well as on the mental health of the people. You will find there are villages, the entire village is having these kind of deformities. So when we talk about fluoride, we have to make sure that the groundwater is not contaminated. And when you're talking about the groundwater, you have to talk about the water which is going into that ground. So be it be the industry, be it be our rivers, they need to be cleaned. Because if they are contaminated, that water is going into the ground and our groundwater is contaminated. So it's not only the human beings are affected, even the plants, even the animal life is affected, the aqua life is also affected, and in the long run, because we are dependent upon animal and plant sources, it leads to biomagnification, and it comes to us.
It actually becomes a persistent organic pollutants.
Yes, it keeps on increasing, and it keeps on increasing in, for example, fish. From fish it goes to the human. It keeps on getting into your body. Yes, in the human body. Therefore, risk analysis and risk assessment is very, very critical for any kind of safety of food.
Okay. And besides fluoride, what other contaminants are of water?
See, when we talk about water, we are getting so much of residues are there in water. Pesticide residues, that's one thing. Heavy metal is a big threat which is coming in water. And when we talk about heavy metal, arsenic, mercury, lead, which are there, and they are going to impact the health of the people. And if you see the latest health data for India, you will find that the cancer is on increase.
Yes.
We are having more and more reported cases of cancer. So all these heavy metals, whether they are coming from water, they are coming from equipment, whether they are coming from heavy, the packaging material, all are getting biomagnified in a human body, and they are manifesting themselves as cancers or various types of diseases.
Okay, ma'am. On that note, I would like to thank ma'am for this discussion, and I hope, my dear friends, that you have been entertained and you have seen and you have understood and you have enjoyed this lecture that we have presented before you, and that you have been benefited by this lecture. On that note, I would like to thank you, dear friends, for watching our show. Stay tuned and keep watching. Thank you.